first to those words, those haunting words, hack.
The one thing that is clear about our current situation is the trajectory. We have lost 30 news polls in a row. It is clear that the people have made up their mind about Mr Abbott's leadership.
Triple J.
Oh, why did you have to say it? Malcolm Turnbull's facing an awkward question today. Should he be held to the same standard that he held Tony Abbott to in 2015? Well, what am I talking about? Those words you just heard were part of Malcolm Turnbull's justification for taking the Prime Ministership from Tony Abbott in 2015. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and today the 30th consecutive negative news poll under Malcolm Turnbull was published. How awkward. But do you really care? Or is it just another political story that only politicians and media commentators care about? Love to hear your view. Give us a call, 1300 0555 36. When our reporter Shalala Medora hit a uni campus with this story, she found that the care factor was seriously low, like worse than the government's polling.
Sunny days sweeping up, clouds away.
Today's show is brought to you by the number 30 and the letters O, M and G.
Can you tell me how to get to National Street?
I do have the confidence of my colleagues. That's the first point, and no one, by the way, is suggesting I don't.
Nothing good can happen when politicians start talking about leadership.
The test is who has the confidence of the Liberal Party, and that is Malcolm Turnbull.
I have every anticipation that Malcolm Turnbull will be the leader at the next election.
Just talking about leadership puts pressure on the Prime Minister.
We shouldn't obsess over polls. I never did. I don't think others should.
And the reason we're talking about it now is because of an own goal by Malcolm Turnbull. He set the benchmark, and today he failed his own test.
I regret making those remarks at the time, making the remarks about 30 news polls at the time.
Wait up. What's Newspoll?
Newspoll is a survey that happens more or less every month, where pollsters ask the audience how they think the government is going and who they're likely to vote for. It's weighted according to age, sex and location, so it's as representative of voters as possible. In the past, bad polls have led to parties getting skittish and changing leaders halfway through their terms.
I asked my colleagues to make a leadership change. A change because I believed that a good government was losing its way.
But do young people actually care?
Do you know what Newspoll is? Newspoll? No. No. Do you know what it is? No.
Have you ever heard of Newspoll? No. That's not even the most concerning bit.
Do you know who the Prime Minister is?
No. I thought it was one lady. I don't remember right now. Sorry.
Yeah, Malcolm Turnbull.
Malcolm Turnbull. Do you know who the Prime Minister is?
You can't be too regular. Is the...
No idea. Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, I didn't even know who he was.
I think that some young people are disengaging from politics, but not necessarily from political issues.
That's Australia's youth representative to the United Nations, 22-year-old Amos Washington. He's weeks into a 6-month tour of Australia, where he's asking young people about what issues matter to them.
I see young people who are passionate about community engagement, passionate about making their country and their state, their suburb and school a better place to live in.
The people I spoke to were interested in a bunch of things.
Like, there's no way I could move out now. It's not affordable.
I'm not a fan of them cutting penalty rates.
I have a HECS debt of $35,000 and I haven't even finished my degree yet.
In fact, according to the last Triple J survey, 7 out of 10 young listeners said they were interested in the 2016 election.
Members on my right, Prime Minister...
But a lot of you felt that the mostly old white guys in Parliament House didn't represent you or your areas of interest. And young people are still cutting themselves out of the conversation. There were more than 380,000 18 to 30-year-olds missing from the electoral roll at the last election. And 20 to 24-year-olds had some of the lowest voter turnout in last year's same-sex marriage postal survey.
If the country treats young people as a cohort that doesn't care, then that's going to rub off on young people. We need to build up young people, tell young people their perspectives are worth it.
Hack. Triple J.
Australia's youth representative to the UN, Amos Washington, ending that report from Shalala Medora on the text line. Who the hell even votes in these polls? I sure don't. Muddy from Albury, you say, I'm just sick of changing the PM every 5 minutes. Someone else says, why would we care when it doesn't achieve anything? The government will call the shots anyway. I'd love to hear from you. Do you think the media just blows these political stories out of proportion, or are you just over Australian politics in general? Does it feel relevant to your life? Send me a text, 0439 757 555. To answer those questions, we have activist Sally Rugg in the studio. She was the Equal Marriage Director at Get Up during the campaign last year, and she's now the National Director for Change.org, which is a site where you can go and start an online petition for something you do actually care about. Sally, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a treat.
It is always a treat. Our other guest is a politician, but a young one. He's the youngest person in the government, Liberal Senator James Paterson. Welcome back to Hack.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Great to have you on the show. Does Malcolm Turnbull deserve a bit of flack for creating this metric and then not living up to it?
Oh, I think he was being refreshingly honest in today, admitting that perhaps it wasn't the best thing to say. We all regret things that we say, and clearly this is in that category. I mean, I think there has been a totally disproportionate focus on one poll run by one newspaper, which is, yes, a guide to what may happen at the next election, which is going to be in about 12 months' time, but it's not an absolute certainty, that's for sure.
Sally, the handful of young people Shalila spoke to at UTS, which is a uni in Sydney, they didn't care about this. None of them even knew what a news poll was. Does that show that young people don't care about politics, or they just don't care about politicking?
I think it's certainly the latter. Young people are really engaged in politics, certainly engaged in specific issues, but they care about stuff like housing affordability and their penalty rates and climate change. They don't care about news polls. They don't care about sex bans. They don't care about the sort of the bad behaviour that goes on in Parliament.
And what are you gauging that on?
I'm gauging that on, I mean, take the marriage equality survey, for instance. The participation rate for young people was through the roof. Young people won that Yes campaign for us. And they didn't just do it in terms of, the amount of ballots they sent back. Young people were mobilising their friends or posting online. They were organising events in their local sports clubs and, workplaces. It goes beyond just participating. I think young people are excited.
James, what do you think? Do you think young people are really engaged in these important issues? Do you think they're engaged enough? Do you think they tune out of some of the to and froing of the politics we hear in Canberra?
I'm a politician, so I'd certainly like to think that they find what we do of great interest. But the reality is that, there's certainly things I'd like to change about Australia. No doubt there are things that Sally would like to change about Australia. Probably not the same things, but actually, by and large, we're living in a pretty amazing country, pretty good country. We're a prosperous country. We're a harmonious country. It's a pretty good place. And young people tend to, around the world and throughout history, get really engaged in politics when things are really bad. If I was living in Spain, for example, where they've got a 40% youth unemployment rate, I'd be really engaged in politics. If I was living in Egypt, where there's been coups and the government being overthrown, I'd be really engaged in politics. It's understandable why, in a pretty good country like Australia, that people aren't as focused on the day-to-day.
Do you buy that, Sally, that we've got a good life here so people are less engaged in politics?
No, I don't buy that. I mean, I do think that we have a good life here, but I also think that young people are really engaged in politics. I mean, Amos, the UN guy who we heard a little snappy from, the UN youth report did a big youth report last year and showed that young people are incredibly passionate about climate change in particular. It was the top issue in 26 electorates, and young people want to see action on this sort of stuff. And I think the reason why they're apathetic isn't because our country is great, it's because they're looking at the government, and the centrepiece of the government's agenda is a gargantuan handout to corporations. This isn't a thing that young people are interested in. They're not interested in corporate tax cuts. They're interested in housing affordability and climate change.
James, are you in there trying to change the minds of your colleagues to be more focused on young people?
So I got elected when I was 28, and one of the things I wondered when I got in was, would my voice be taken any less seriously, or would I have any less of an opportunity to influence policy because of my age? And refreshingly, no, that wasn't the case. I haven't found that as a problem. I think most people in Canberra recognise that my constituents have just as much right to be represented as anyone else, and the people I represent deserve to have their voice heard. It's pretty clear, though, that young people are one of the groups that are underrepresented in the federal parliament, and sometimes there are generational differences in emphasis. When you are personally experiencing trying to buy a home, you have a different perspective on it than if you bought your home 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Because you have way less equity. Okay. I guess it's going to be a continuing battle to try and, I guess, make that voice heard in Parliament, especially when we're so underrepresented. I guess we need to look to more youthful candidates to get into Parliament. We're out of time for this one, guys. Sally Rugg and James Paterson, thank you for joining us there.